Game 8 of the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. What a brilliant game we had today. With mistakes, but nevertheless it was entertaining. E4 with white from Magnus, E5, knight f3, and Jan goes for the Petrov. And Magnus this time plays D4, which is again a relatively safe line. Knight takes E4, bishop D3, D5, and knight takes E5. And Jan goes for knight d7. It's all well-known theory at this point. And Magnus chooses a rather simple line trading off pieces. Knight takes d7. Knight c3 in this position is a sharper option, but Magnus was probably not intending to go into sharp positions. Knight takes d7, bishop takes. And here Magnus played a really interesting move, knight to d2. And Jan's played this position with white, and he's played the main line with castles, bishop d6 and knight c3, and after takes castles, queen h5, f5, bishop, rook e1. He actually went on to win against Yu Yang in 2019, so he's familiar with the white side of this position, and in the press conference he admitted that he also knew that knight d2 is an idea, but he probably had not looked at it in much detail. And after Magnus played knight d2, he just took the knight without too much thinking and allowed Magnus to play bishop takes d2. There was an option here to play f5, really interesting choice. If Nepo wanted to spice things up, he could have tried that move and said, okay, I want a really wild fight. And of course that creates a hole here on e5, but it also gives black lots of dynamic play with bishop d6 and castles and activity on the king side here with this pawn advance to f5. So he didn't choose that. Instead he took, and after bishop takes, he played bishop d6, which Carlsen later said was not the most accurate move here. He said he's not supposed to play bishop d6 here. So that's already a small inaccuracy. And the correct way to respond was to play queen e7 check and take the draw in this position. Because now if queen e2, then obviously he trades queens, and that's easily drawn. And if bishop e3, then queen b4 check. And now white has to play queen d2, and he can, well, if he takes here, then it can get serious. But after queen takes queen, it is pretty much an easy draw for black. If queen takes b2, then things can get serious with castles. And now rook f2b on white is temporarily pawned down, but he's exerting a lot of pressure. So this is not the way to play with black if you want to play for a win. But Nepo should have realized that, hey, I don't have much in this position, and I should probably just play for a draw and take the draw. But he was wanting to go for a fight, so he played bishop d6, and after Magnus castled, then he began to think, which was already a bad sign, because now it became apparent to him that the position's not as easy as he had thought it would be. And Anish Giri, looking at this position, said this is really nasty preparation from Magnus Carlsen, because on the surface this looks, especially a move like knight d2, looks extremely harmless. And in particular, given the match situation where Magnus is up a game and Magnus only needs to make draws to win the World Championship, this looks like Magnus is just willing to trade pieces and make a draw, and he's not got any ambitions. So that has got the extra deceptive factor to it, which Nepo fell for, I guess, in this game. Because he mindlessly played bishop d6 without much thinking. After castles, he began to think. But why is that? Because let's say if black castles in this position, obviously Nepo sees white has queen h5, and then black has to play f5 to stop mate. But then white can begin to play on the dark squares. Now he's conceded this square on e5, and after, let's say, bishop g5, queen e8, queen f3, now he's hitting d5, so c6. There's always this idea of bishop f4 trading off the dark square bishop, and then e5 will be a huge hole in the position. Although the engines think that white should keep this in hand and instead try to press the advantage in a different way like that. But obviously this is not, if he was playing for a win, this is not the position that he wanted to get. So castles is not an option. He probably saw queen to h4 as an option, but he may have suspected that Magnus had some preparation here. Obviously, if Magnus is going for this, then queen h4 is the most obvious move that you look at. And after rook e1 check here, g3, queen takes d4, bishop c3, queen c5. It's not easily apparent how Magnus had intended to press his initiative here because of his lead in development. But Nepo was understandably scared to go into this line, even if he is up material. Magnus could have had some really dangerous preparation in this line, but it remains to be shown what it is, because the engines do not think, at least not immediately, that this is like lost for black or anything of that sort. And it would need really accurate engine-like play from white to perhaps get back material equality in this position. So that was an option. There was also the option of queen f6, but that's a little passive, because after queen h5, obviously you cannot take on d4 because bishop c3 and you g7 will drop. And if you castle, then, well, you're running into checkmate. If you castle queenside, then bishop g5, and that guy is dropping. So he would have to play a move like bishop to e6, and after rook d1, king d7, because after king d8 we have again bishop g5 as a problem. So king d7, and if long castle, yes, of course, bishop g5 and hits the rook. So king d7, but again that's not active play. So then he might have been kicking himself, saying, why didn't I take the draw with queen e7? And now he has to find a move that gives him some fighting chances, and he found it h5, which seems to have stunned Magnus, because he went into a deep thought here, and he thought for over 40 minutes. And obviously Magnus understood that the principal way to fight against h5 is to play in the center. So the correct line was c4, and I'm sure Magnus saw this. And now if queen h4, then g3 takes, and then bishop c3, and again we have problems on g7. So queen g4, take, and this is good for white. But the difficult line for white is if after c4, in this position, after c4, if black takes on c4 first, because then after bishop takes, queen h4, then you can throw in rook e1 checking f8, and now if you play g3, then black has queen takes d4, and unfortunately this guy is loose, and so white needs to spend one move to save this guy, and that extra tempo is all that black needs to make his position more stable. So in this position, probably Magnus missed the shot queen f3, threatening mate, because this is not really a big threat. If queen takes h2, for example, king f1 check, then king e2, now he's attacked. So even if rook e8 check, king d3, no problem. In fact, white's king is safer here, and black is either losing his queen or getting checkmated. So this is not dangerous, but this was probably too much for Magnus to see. And even if he saw this, he was not sure of himself here. And later on in the press conference, he in fact admitted that his brain was fried, and that was probably the result of the fatigue of game 6 and game 7 back to back, and he had not fully recovered from that grueling experience. So he decided to avoid all these lines, and instead he chose a really simple line, which Nepo said later in the press conference it is a silent draw offer. And again, Nepo's psychology was bothering him here. He wanted to fight, and he played the fighting move h5, but now he's like, okay, if I play queen e7, which is the correct move, then, well, we trade queens and it's drawn. And he psychologically, he couldn't accept that reality. He was like, no, I want to fight. And so he played the weak move king f8, thinking that he could prolong the fight, but it was confusion in his head, because bishop b4 from Magnus, because that was pretty obvious Magnus was going to do that anyway. And now you have to defend this guy. Now you're losing your dark squared bishop. And so now he played queen e7. But then now Magnus sensed that, hey, I actually don't have to trade queens. I can trade this guy. And after he takes, I have a good bishop versus a bad bishop. And my dominance over the light squares, or the dark squares, is going to be a huge factor in this game. So Nepo, because of his mental state, I guess, got himself into his inferior position, and now he was defending the rest of the game. So he could have taken a draw on move 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, but now he's fighting for a draw for the rest of this game, and that was not a happy result. So anyway, queen d2 from Magnus. Now rook e8. Now Magnus increases the pressure with rook a to e1. And now a really strange move, rook h6 from Nepo. He's probably thinking of rook e6, but he doesn't have the time for that. The correct way was rook takes e1, rook takes, and now g6, so that you can play king g7 and rook to e8. Magnus could have played rook e5, for example, and then king g7 and queen g5, let's say, but then rook e8, and the advantage is not significant in this position. Or let's try queen g5. Now, if king g7 in this position, I think queen e7, maybe not queen e7, but perhaps rook e7. I haven't looked at this particular line in detail. Is good enough. But I think that here, after queen g5, yes, black has a really interesting move, h4, and I wanted to show this line, why it's so interesting, because let's imagine black plays c6. Then white can cement his domination on the dark squares by playing h4. So in order to prevent h4 from white, black himself plays h4 and says, no, you're not going to have domination on the dark squares here, because now if c3, a5, f4, b6, black can just sit here and say, you got nothing and I've got everything under control, and that could have held the position for black. So given that information here in this position, after takes and g6, white himself could try h4, but then king g7, queen g5, rook e8 takes here, queen e6, and black is still holding the balance in this position. So that was an interesting choice. But anyway, he played like this, rook h6, and now Magnus came in with queen g5. So now d5 is loose, so black defended that with c6, and now takes here and rook e1. Here Nepo again missed his practical chance. He should have played rook e6, because now if takes and takes here, then he has check here, and then after bishop f1, he's got f6 attacking the queen, so queen has to move, and queen b1 and hitting these pawns, and if queen b3, then bishop h5 threatening bishop to e2 and hitting this guy. So he has to stop that threat, but now the king is loose and this diagonal is opened up. So b6 just holding that guy, and white has to play king f2 holding these two squares, but his king is still exposed, and Nepo could just stay in this position with a move like g5 and say, you cannot get too active with your queen because my pieces, your pawns here hanging, and my queen is really active. So this could have been his practical chance for holding the game, but he missed that. And instead he played queen to f6, but Magnus is saying, no, I'm not trading queens, I'm going back. Magnus actually missed queen g3 in this position, because if queen d6, then he had rook e5. Because now if rook e6, then rook takes, because if let's say he throws in queen takes g3, white has rook takes e8 check first, and then wins the queen and he's up a piece. And if takes here, then queen b8 is really strong, because queen e1 check, bishop f1, no problem, and these pawns are falling faster than white's queenside pawns. So that was actually pretty good for Magnus, but he missed that. He played queen e3, and now it allows him to play bishop d7. So there is no more rook takes e8 in that critical line. So Magnus plays h3, which is worth explaining, because now if queen g3, let's say we go back and forth like this, and now play rook e5, black can play rook e6, because if takes here, then well, queen takes g3 and there's no rook takes. And if takes here, then well, rook e1 check, bishop f1, take, and now in fact after rook c1, it's black who is winning, or is got a much better position. So to avoid this line, Magnus first in this position played h3, so that now let's show the line. If let's say queen d6 and queen g5, and then we do the dance again, rook e5, rook e6, now rook takes h5, because now if takes, then takes, and the king is not you don't have to play bishop to f1 to block it. So bishop's defending this, and if he goes here, then well, check, and white rook goes there, and white's collecting pawns as well. So he would have been a clean pawn up in this endgame here like this. So that's the point of h3. So Nepo played h4, and now c4. Magnus senses the moment. He understands that Nepo's defense is sort of shaky here, so he tries to open the position. dc4, bishop takes c4. Now this is a difficult position for black, because it's not easy to find moves. The first candidate is king g8. Okay, your king doesn't want to be here. Let him go into this corner and maybe hide here on h7, g6, king g7 maybe later on. But now queen e7, and that's not easy to meet this move. He would have to sacrifice f7 by playing rook d6 and attacking d4. And then after he takes, king moves away, avoids discovery. And white has to sacrifice the pawn and play like this, and maybe try to squeeze something out of this endgame, which is not easy at all. But if he tries to hold this pawn with a move like rook f4, then well, g5, rook e4, bishop f5. Well, king g6 works too, but bishop f5 is straightforward enough. Or maybe, okay, king g6, getting out of the 7th rank first, so that there's no check. And now white can try to, the only try for white is to play bishop e2, bishop g4. But after bishop e2, he can play bishop f5. And if rook e7, then bishop d7, and d4 is still hanging. And now if bishop g4, then takes here. And if takes there, then takes there. And black is holding this with h3 and rook c4. Because he gets check and this configuration, now the king is completely locked in, and f2 is always hanging. So c5, he can play rook c2 and force him back to g1. We could also play rook f1 and go for that pawn. But either way, this is good for black to hold the draw. But he missed that, and he also missed queen to d6, which was a far more ambitious try in this position, because obviously he looked at queen b3 in this line, but what he missed was the in-your-face move b5, saying you can take that pawn, I have no issues. And on the surface this seems crazy, but look at the follow-up, a5. And now we realize that this bishop is actually pretty loose here on f7. It doesn't have many squares to run to. And the only square it can go to is bishop g8, threatening mate here on f7. But then queen f4 stops mate. And black is now threatening a4, kick this queen, which is the only defender of this bishop, and then take that guy. And this guy is not moving anywhere. And let's say white plays a careless move. Let's say in this position, instead of bishop g8, white plays a careless move like a3, just to show what could go wrong here. Queen f4 attacks that guy, bishop here. Now rook f6 threatens mate, or threatens to win this rook. So rook e2, queen a4 hits the queen, he has to defend. Check here. Now queen f1 hits these two guys, so he defends both with b4. And now bishop f5, threatening bishop b1, and that guy is still hanging. He also covers h7, by the way, this guy. So he's got no squares. Now he's threatening bishop b1. So white plays rook b2. Now bishop b4 hits this guy. So f3, he's created holes in this position. Now bishop f5. And white is in zugzwang, because there's no way, there's no move to save this guy. And if he moves the rook, then bishop b1 and takes. So this was a really nasty line for black. Of course, Magnus would have found the solid way of playing if he went this way. I don't think he would have. Bishop g8, he wouldn't have gone into this line. Bishop g8, queen f4, and here amazingly rook e4 is the move that holds the balance for white, because he can't take this mate. So queen moves back and he stops a4 with a4 himself, not a3, allowing him a4, and f3 here, and a highly complicated position, but black is by no means lost in this complex line. But Nepo perhaps thought that he could just play b5 in this position, and he completely missed queen a3 check. I mean, obviously he thought that he must have thought that queen d6 here and no problems, but he had missed queen takes a7, because now if bc4 then queen a8 check, and it's actually mate on the back rank. So this came as a huge shock to everyone who's watching, because now queen d6 is impossible. So he has to go king g8, and now Magnus picks up this guy, because if bc then queen takes d7. And here also there was the possibility of throwing this bishop at h3. I mean, why not? And some interesting lines here. For example, if rook e8 check and king h7 and then bishop takes f7, Magnus saw this line and realized that this is actually not working for white. Because let's show the point of this line first. Let's say if queen g5 threatening mate, then white has rook h8 check, takes, queen b8 check, king 8 here, and then queen g8 checkmate. But Magnus saw this and found the defense rook g6 in this position, because now if check take, check here, king h7, the king is escaping through g5. So it was amazing that Magnus, despite being tired and his brain being fried, he saw this far in this line. But Magnus also understood that after bishop h3, he probably would have to go for queen takes here. And after queen takes, rook e8 check first, king h7, and then bishop takes f7. And he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus 4. A clear advantage for him as far as the endgame material goes. And this is the sort of position that Magnus dreams of having anyway. So he would be safely in control in this position, although by no means it's winning on the spot with bishop after bishop f5. But Nepo instead chose to play the passive queen d8 and keep all his pieces on the board. But that was, in hindsight, that was not the right move, because Magnus just played bishop b3, and it's really hard for black to get anything going. The only option he had here was to try rook h5 with the idea of rook g5, rook takes, or on pressuring g2, bishop takes h3, but he missed that. Instead, he played rook here. He could have played bishop e6, but then that amounts to the same line as we saw in the game. And if rook g6 threatening queen g5, then rook e5 stops those ideas. So that was not working. So he played rook d6, but now rook e4 holds this guy. He's also threatening rook f4. In some lines, rook takes h4 as well, because that guy is hanging, queen b8 and queen takes d6. So lots going on here. So bishop e6 was played by Nepo, and then Magnus just trades and plays queen c5 solidly. He's a clean pawn up, and black just has too many weaknesses in the position, and white plus can start getting a pawn rolling this way from b3 a4. So Nepo said enough is enough, I'm going for counterplay, but that was not sufficient. Queen takes pawn, check here, he takes that, but Magnus takes with check, queen e4 check, and now he played a really nice move, b3, not giving up this pawn for free, but playing b3, also getting ready to play a4 if need be, but more importantly he's targeting that guy, because after takes, check, and he takes that guy and b3 is defended. So now Magnus is up 2 pawns. Now he's played queen e5, he's stopped any kind of perpetual, and he's completely in control. But the game is still not over. You gotta play some precise moves. So queen b2 was tried, check here, and queen came back to d3, and now he's threatening to push this guy. So queen f2. And now Magnus played it slow. Maybe he was trying to get to time control as well. It's 39th move, so queen c3, no rush. Queen f4, king g1. Now he's got another hour on the clock. So now we can start to think how to proceed here. So he found this sequence: queen d3 check, g6, queen d1. So he's controlling his back rank, and now he's getting ready to push this guy. So let's imagine if queen d6, then d5, king here, and then king first tuck him away. And now if the king tries to get too close, then white has queen f3 and queen c3 and b4. Ideas like that, because now if takes, then queen f3 check, trades queens, and now with this outside pass pawn, white is easily winning because the white king will march and grab these pawns while that guy is busy taking that one. So that would be a winning idea for white. So Nepo tried queen e3, but then king h1, and now he had to go for some counterplay, but that's not enough. d5, g4 takes, h3, and yes, the white king is getting opened up, but queen f3 has got 3 extra pawns, and plus if let's say he takes, then king takes, queen d2 here, king f4, and this is the kind of position that Magnus will easily convert despite his king being open, because there's always queen e4 check and blocks like that which check the king and trade off black's queen. So Nepo was like, enough is enough, and he didn't go this far. In fact, he resigned in this position, and Magnus won this game. So gotta give credit to Magnus for the way he played this game and the idea that he showed, which was quite rich in hindsight and wasn't quite the drawish game that most people thought it was gonna be, and fooled Nepo as well. I think that after this game, the players are probably even more tired, so it's quite likely that we'll see more mistakes in the coming rounds. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nepo manages to even win a game against Carlsen, because both players seem to be really tired, and Magnus even admitted that today, that his brain was fried. So if Nepo is able to fry his brain even more in the next 6 games that he's got, then perhaps we could have a more interesting match. So I'm looking forward to that.